Are we admitting? Yeah, okay, cool. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to wait a minute or two for everyone to arrive. The usual Zoom protocol, just make sure you're all on mute, which I think you all are. Yeah, we'll just wait a minute or so. Right, I think looks like everyone might be in. Welcome everyone to our next Embercombe Online session with our founder, Mac Macartney. Thank you, Mac, for joining us. This is a wonderful opportunity for everyone to have a very interactive session where you can have a Q&A with Mac about two of our flagship programs here at Embercombe, namely the Journey and the Descent. And Mac will just go into a brief history of how the programs developed, along with his Indigenous wealth of knowledge that he's gathered over his many years, and how that formulated the creation of the programs. And then that will be about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how it goes with you, Mac. And then we will open up to questions, where you will have a little raised hand, little icon in the participant section, or if you want to do it lo-fi human style, you can also raise your hands and I will unmute you. So yeah, either digital or the usual way. Anyway, thank you very much for joining, and over to you, Mac.
Thanks, Nusha. So hello, everyone. Really good to see you here. I am going to do my very best not to succumb to temptation and go on and on about how the journey came to be and the descent and things like that. And
I think you should.
Because I think on one of the earlier calls, I did speak quite a bit on one of the online sessions about this. But just to say, when I arrived on my first meeting with the Indigenous people that taught me, there were a whole number of challenges, but one of them, which I hadn't been anticipating, was their demand to know what would I do with what I was possibly going to be taught. In other words, a complete dissatisfaction with the notion that it would purely be for my self-development, for my spiritual kind of coming of age, if you like. And that led to my realization, if you like, that the deal was they only offer this deep and extended mentorship on the understanding that almost immediately I bring myself far more present and active in the world for a different kind of world. So then we kind of retraced steps, and they were saying, it doesn't matter how many books you read about nature and connection and belonging and all these things, though books have their place and can be very, very helpful and useful, or how many workshops you attend, or how many videos you watch, or whatever. Ultimately, it is deep, immersive time in nature that must be the platform upon which the whole thing's predicated. In other words, you've got to get outdoors, and I was already a very outdoors person. And I think, you know, it's interesting, but with John Young and his 8 Yields work, it's predicated really upon time in your sit spot in nature. Like without that, you know, then really it remains in the head. It never moves into the body. It never moves into the deep intuitive knowing of ourselves. And For us, this is really important because we are so far away, in a sense, from where the knowledge and experience of deep connection with nature came from. So anyway, so when the journey was, when I arrived back and got to the point where Embercombe had begun, and was thinking in terms of how do I translate this experience into some kind of offering that's manageable in terms of time to people, which would hold the sort of most powerful threads of what I'd been taught, and offer people what I describe as like a piece of string or a slender but very strong rope, which, let's say, is placed at the feet of the people who are interested, and the invitation is to pick it up, to pick up this very slender piece of cord and begin, if you like, to follow that piece of cord, knowing that in so doing, you will go through everything. Okay, so having picked it up does not mean we become immune in any kind of way to all the challenges that life brings. It simply means that we have our hands wrapped around this. We are on our path, and the journey is underway. And the only requirement is that we never let go of the piece of rope, which in itself is a massive undertaking. And I equate this with, having once in my life a period of time when I was driving huskies in northern Finland. The guy who was training us, and this is he's screaming above the noise of the dogs going crazy and the sledges smashing against the trees, because the dogs are just crazy to run first thing in the morning. And there are fights breaking out amongst the dogs and all the rest of it. And we novice sledge drivers are being required to step in there and sort the dogs out and disentangle the lines and try and get our sledge ready to go. So it's a very unruly team of dogs that we're dealing with. The only rule that accompanied once we let go was basically, whatever happens, do not let go of the reins that you have, if you like. Because if you let go, then you're gone, and the dogs will not stop running. And then you've got a very, very, very long walk as you follow the tracks and try to regain them. And of course, on the first corner, the dogs go around it at full speed. It's a very tight corner, and almost every single one of the novice sledge drivers, including myself, became airborne and went flying through the air. And in my mind is just don't let go of the rope. And then I'm pulled for, I don't know, half a mile, banging against rocks, against trees, against all kinds of things. Extremely painful experience. And in the end, managed to get back on the sledge. So it's not as physically painful for most of us, but it is no easy matter to keep hold of those reins as we try to walk a self-directed, self-loving, generous, giving life, okay? A life where we seek to become a whole person, knowing our fears and our weaknesses, but to address ourselves, where we are in relation to our minds and our thinking, where we are in connection to our emotions and our feeling, where we are in connection to our bodies, and where we are in connection to spirit. So the journey seeks to create a condensed experience within which these things happen, and offers at the end the opportunity to take a pledge. And that pledge can be whatever you wish, in the context of, if you like, somebody who is committed to hold on to this rope and seeks to have a life that is in deep connection with life, with yourself, with each other, with nature, and to journey that path through your lifetime, if you like. And you do not have to take that pledge. It's only, everything in the journey is an invitation, you know, but that's what life is. It's an invitation, isn't it? It says, here's the deck of cards you've been dealt. And I understand that you're pissed off because the cards aren't as nice as you'd like them to be. And that, you know, where's the ace, where's the king, where's the queen, all the rest of it, you know. We understand all that, but they are the deck. They are the cards that you've got. What will you do with them? You know, not just one day, but onwards through time. So that's the journey. Time out in nature, on your own, in solitude. Time in large group plenary meetings when people are invited to share and to really bring themselves forward, and most of all, to listen well to each other's and to feel deeply. Time in nature working with other people, together, shoulder to shoulder, undertaking some kind of task, sometimes in conversation, sometimes not. Time in small group work, sharing stories, often with difficulty and pain and joy and success as part of it. So we could say it's normal on the journey that there are tears and laughter. But that, to me, is a little bit like a life, isn't it? You know, if there's only tears and no laughter, that is the truth for some people, but it's a very bereft life in some ways. If there's only laughter and no tears, then maybe our ears have been plugged and our eyes have been shielded, because there is enough out there to weep about. So anyway, that's the journey, really. And I would say the content of the journey we do not disclose, mostly because if I disclose it to you, it's so banal. You would think, what on earth do I want to go all the way down to Devon to do that for? Yet the journey is an extremely powerful process that most people who've ever done it speak of it in those terms. But also because though we attempt to plan our lives, you know, it doesn't tend always to work out that way, does it? I think we are constantly being surprised. And so the whole idea is to become resourceful enough to be able to meet things as they unfold and joyfully dance or sorrowfully dance with what is, and that's it. So the descent. For those that want to go one step further, and this is not a judgment, because many people want to take many steps forward, but it doesn't include returning to Embercombe to do the descent or other programs. But let me say, for those that have the feeling that having done the journey after some months, or in some cases years, return to do the descent is specifically focused around a deep to take that whole nature connection piece and go deeper. So it's one part of the journey where there is a process that happens that really, as it were, puts you into the earth and brings you into deep relationship with the trees, with nature. The descent, if you like, on the journey that takes maybe 3 hours. So on the descent, it's 6 days. And in some ways, there's not too much more to be said about the descent, because, you know, I mean, I, for one, would say that the themes of the descent were with me from when I was little, and I see no likelihood of it ever not being the case, that I would try to go deeper. And I actively pursue that. So to go deep, some of you Well, I'm looking out the window right now at the latest contraption of my bird feeder. It's been designed to try and resist the forays that squirrels and rats are making to eat the bird food. In fact, I'll just turn it in case you could see it. I've no idea if you'll be able to, but let's find out. No, can you see that? There's a dustbin lid upside down to prevent the squirrels and rats getting up. And there's a little fork stick with the feeder. And I'm very proud to say that this, my latest invention, is proving to be very successful. And I've watched various attempts by the squirrels and rats to raid it, and none of them have been successful yet. So I might market it and drop doing the journey and the descent and simply go into business and try and make that fortune that's eluded me most of my life. But for now, the why I have that, because it is such a good way for me to start my day. I begin the day by giving food to these little beings. Yeah. And because I do that and have done it over time, that little robin comes to me and feeds from my hand every day. And now he feeds from my little boy's hand. And the chaffinch is getting close. And this winter, I hope the chaffinch will land on my hand. None of this says anything about me, except perhaps the quality of persistence. But it says everything about the opportunity to feel the extraordinary grace that comes when a wild animal that is entirely free gives itself into your trust, as it were, and takes food from your hand. So the bird gets some food. I get a blessing. This is one small way, if you like, about how I carry the descent on. And why, of course, I would never say that the descent is the only way to go about this. There are many, many ways. Things like the journey and the descent give you perhaps the inspiration, the impetus, that lovely feeling of being in a community of others, to find whatever it is in yourself, to go forward and go forward powerfully, confidently. And I guess, hopefully, forever. Unfortunately, of course, it can't promise that. I mean, ultimately, it always lands back in our laps, doesn't it? You know, it's been a very powerful week. I've spoken aloud to everybody saying how meaningful it was. I leave feeling like a changed person or a deepened person. And then when I get home, I am corralled by all the normality of my life. And for many of us, within a relatively short period of time, it begins to fall away. So I wouldn't overpromise for these experiences, because I, for one, have been through some very powerful ceremonies. One of them went on for 3 months in North America with the people that taught me. And a story I often have told is that when I got back, it was about a month later that I suddenly realized that I'd broken my pledge. The pledge that I'd made after all these ceremonies, all this input, I'd broken it. Not because I'd done anything, but because I hadn't. Yeah. And I had relaxed back into a feeling of, my God, that was challenging, that was exhausting. I think I've got my badge. And I enjoyed sort of walking around feeling like that. And it, like sand between my fingers, it disappeared. Because that could never be good enough for me, I had to swallow my pride and then set off again. And, you know, I've mentioned persistence. I really do believe that is one of those qualities which is very underrated. The person that manages to keep standing up again, no matter how many times they might trip or fall, stub their toe, you know, be silly, be stupid. The person that keeps getting up, that is an amazing quality, and yeah, a fine one. So anyway, that I think I must at least have filled up my 15 minutes, but that's the journey and the descent, in a sort of as much of a nutshell as I can create at the moment. And I'd be very, very happy to welcome any kind of questions that I'll answer if I can without compromising the experience.
Thank you very much, Mac. So yes, so this is now your arena, everyone, to give any questions that you had to Mac. So I had a question actually come up about the descent. So because I haven't noticed any hands as of yet. It was a lady. Her name was Jenny. And her main question was, how physically challenging is the descent? As I have visual problems, I wear strong contact lenses, but still have very poor vision in the dark. So I can't sleep outside all night. Do we have accommodation, or is it camping? Does that divulge too much in terms of the descent and accommodation?
With the descent, we do disclose quite a lot more of the content than we do with the journey. Although to some extent we do with both. So I would say to Jenny, firstly, we do anything we could to assist and support someone with any kind of situation or condition that meant that they might be unduly vulnerable, as it were, during the program, to support them. But of course, there is a point where to do that, it might no longer be the descent. So it is not physically challenging in the sense of you know, climbing a mountain or canoeing a whitewater river or anything of that kind. It is challenging in the sense that you fast during the program, and if one thinks of that as challenging, then it's challenging. It's about 3 days of fasting without food. For anybody that's fasted regularly, then you would say that's ridiculous. That's not challenging in the least, because which indeed it isn't. It's only our I mean, having fasted for 14 days, you know, many times I can, and held the journey once, having fasting the full 7 days. It's all in our minds, mostly, for most of us. Not all of us, I have to say, but for most of us. It's just the fact that we're used to these things. And like when I used to smoke cigarettes, you know, you just sort of, you live your life from one to the next. We do that with meals, don't we? In a way, they become parking points where you relax. Say, now it's my lunch or my dinner. So there is fasting in the descent for about 3 days. The other thing is, yes, for also 3 or 4 nights on the descent, it's not intense. You're in bivouacs, okay, and you are taught how to make your bivouac, which you do in the daylight, and you're assisted to whatever degree you need assistance. But in the end, you do sleep out in nature for those number of days. For somebody who, for whom this was an unusual experience and maybe a first time, and possibly very frightening, then we would do all we could. I must get a glass of water soon, but anyway, we would say, let's pitch your bivouac close to where the main base is, and we will always have somebody in that main base should you need help. Or we would discuss what would be a manageable risk, yeah, and how we could do that. Let me just get a glass of water. Hold on a sec. I think if then it felt that even with placing the bivouac close to the main camp, that it really wasn't possible, then we'd probably say, you know, then the descent probably isn't right for you. And but even then, I mean, I think that would then be an ongoing conversation about whether something could be arranged with Embercombe that would provide you with an experience that was similar, tailored, and specifically designed to try and help that person into a place where they could have that experience. And I think that is possible. But anyway, that would be the answer to that one.
No, I recall when I did the journey a few years back, I had some sleep trouble then, and the staff were very accommodating in trying to make the experience as comfortable, although it is the idea is to sort of push your boundaries into the unknown and to go into that level of discomfort on a potentially psychological level, because that's where the sort of barriers are broken and that's where the insights are gained. So there has to be some level of struggle in order to kind of broach the other side, so to speak. Yes, Katrina, I see our lovely catalyst participant. I'm asking you to unmute. I can't seem to. There we go. Hello.
Hi, Nisha. Hi, Mac. It's really nice to be here and to be able to join in with these online sessions. Thank you. I think it's kind of a two-part question. The first would be actually what the relationship between Catalyst and the Journey and Descent is, and whether if one has done the Catalyst journey, whether one should go straight to the Descent if that's possible, or whether it's worth doing the journey as well. And then the other one would be around how one integrates back into normal life, as it were. Is it worth sort of leaving a larger amount of time after either experience to kind of integrate and actually make the most of what could be a really powerful experience?
Yeah, you know, I think we used to say that if you've done Catalyst, you could go straight to the Descent. When we've had a couple of people where that's happened, and it's felt that some, you know, the Catalyst and the Journey are sufficiently different to mean that there was it did present some challenges. Having said that, I think a lot depends on the person. So my instincts would be to say, I think it's something we could discuss and you know, find a mutually satisfactory answer. But I'd also say they are significantly different, and unless there was just a real strong desire to do the Descent, then I'd say go, and depending when you've done Catalyst or somebody had, I'd say consider doing the Journey, because they began from the same route. Let's offer a version of the Journey to young people. And because they are a different grouping of people, let's design it differently, but it has evolved. And I think the gap between the experiences has widened, not the essence, because the essence of both is really great. Is that okay as an answer? So
yes, thank you.
Okay. Integration is a really big thing, okay? I mean, there are so many fabulous programs that don't really offer anything meaningful in terms of integration. And the reason, and we've pondered this so much, but the reason, of course, is cost. You know, because it would be easy to provide something that does allow and does sort of host integration, but it costs. So I'm not up to date with this, but I believe Catalyst has quite an active sort of alumni groups, as it were, that connect, and that, of course, is perhaps and potentially a strong way of helping with integration. With the Journey, we've negotiated with a group of local coaches. I think it is 3 months worth, which is 1 session a month of coaching, which is given free by the coaches to Journey alumni to help them with that specific purpose of integrating into life, their normal lives. But also there are buddy pairs which are set up at the end, which are also encouraged to speak to each other once a week for several months after the program. And then lastly, a number of Journey alumni groups have been formed. I think London certainly is very active, Bristol, Stroud, I think, where people come together under their own steam for that, again, that very purpose.
Yeah.
And I really love all those things. Ultimately, it always comes back to ourselves, doesn't it? The question is, how much do we hunger for anything, really? You know, there's another human being that we wish to, you know, befriend or explore relationship with. You know, do we persist? Do we, you know, there is an academic aspiration we have. Are we willing to go through the rather slow journey of acquiring whatever it is we need to get to that place, or any aspiration? So that's where I think it comes ultimately back to, is how much do I want this? How much does it matter? And our lives are just actually targeted by enormous number of organizations and forces out there to attempt to distract us. And it's pretty tough.
Thank you, Mac.
You're welcome.
Any more questions? Janet, I see the real hand is up. Wonderful.
Hiya. Yeah, I was very fascinated by this idea of the journey, but I was also very interested in your pilgrimage that you did for 3 weeks, where you traveled across to Anglesey, and I was just very curious to know whether you would bring any aspects of your own pilgrimage into this journey. And I'd be really interested to know what were if you were willing to share any wonderful highlights where you were dancing joyfully, and any of the low lights where you were, if you feel able to share, because obviously it's very personal, but I'm just incredulous that you actually did that, and how amazing. But I'd love to hear more about it.
But Janet, I'll say a little bit, but it would probably be, I'm not sure that it would be really on the point of this call, though I would enjoy sharing with you that. But you see that for me was, in a sense, a fragment of an answer to Katrina's question. An overriding invitation given to me by those Indigenous people was, create your own ceremonies. You know, do not feel that you have to stand in front of somebody who names themselves an authority in your spiritual development and sort of sit and listen to them and do what they say. Now, choose that path if you wish, but ultimately it's between you and creation. And you know, every night before I go to bed, I go outside the front door. I step onto the little patio that's outside our front door, and I go through a little sequence of movements which express or attempt to express my passionate love for the experience of this life, to the earth, to this land, and then moving my arms in a particular way all around the globe of this earth, her people, all creatures, all waters, the air, all earth, mountains, deserts, forests, the whole lot. And then I bring them up in a sweep upwards to the sky and the stars and the moon and the wonderment of all of that. And then I wrap my arms, if you like, around the whole thing. And I just say, thank you. Okay, so when I did that journey, it is one small part of an endless process for me of seeking to go deeper. And that was a particular ceremony held in deep winter, as I think you know. So I wanted, it was a dreaming journey, and the time for that is deep midwinter. So leaving in early January through January, basically. And I designed it, you know, as I wished it to be. No maps, no compass, no tent, no ordinary food, you know, and it was ecstatic and terrifying, you know. It was blissful and extremely painful. It was everything. Moments of joy. Well, at the risk of disappointing you know, when I finally made it, walking from Malvern, when I finally made it to the top of the Llanberis Pass in Snowdonia, and in a rather weakened state decided to spend a night, which I later made 2 nights, at the Pennygurid Hotel, and ran this bath. They have this incredible Victorian bath, which is just masses of dials and ancient, beautiful brass knobs on it. And it's very deep. And I filled it with hot water. I attempted in the book, but I cannot describe the exquisite experience of lowering my poor, aging, painful body into that water. I mean, I think I said in the book, sort of thing, you know, it's not often mentioned as the summit of spiritual sort of enlightenment, as it were, but I have to say, as speaking as the sensualist that I am, I just almost screamed with joy at what that felt like. And why I'm a great believer in this, you know, many of us don't think much about water, is because we've never been thirsty, you know. It doesn't matter to us very much, but, you know, become radically thirsty and you soon understand that water is sacred, you know. Food, you know, it's the same. Breath, it's the same. Light, the sun is the same, you know. We, the 1% of the 1%, there's a big question for those Native Americans. How do we train someone as extraordinarily privileged as you? And they weren't talking about my education, which they considered to be a blight, you know. They were talking about the fact that I'd never been thirsty, never been hungry, never been too hot, and never been too cold. So why that bath had that effect on me was because of everything that went before it. I could choose other moments, just standing on the seashore at the end, watching the waves coming in, feeling the presence of ancient relations, humans of some form or other, have been on this land, Britain, for nearly 1 million years, 850,000 years, Homo erectus and different types, you know. As we know, we have Neanderthal in most of us, some of the remnants of their genes in us. Feeling their presence feeling the hugeness of this human story, feeling the fact that, thousands have lived lives and we are a direct descendant, do you know what I mean? All that lovemaking, all that rape, all that sort of horror, all that bliss, all that wonder, all that extraordinary human story. And here we are, Maxine, Claire, Vicky, Amanda, Katrina, Alara, we are the point, we are the arrowhead of that incredible trail. So part of the journey made sense of that for me. I felt, this is what I am. This is where I am. What am I called to do? In my heart, I said, I am called to declare our earth sacred again. I am declared to say, without embarrassment, our Mother Earth. I don't give a shit, in a sense, how that goes down with whoever I speak it to. I don't care. It's what is in my heart, and I have to speak it as loud and as strong as I can, because I will not go to my deathbed ashamed that I never stood by what I consider to be beautiful.
Thanks, Mac. We have some more questions coming up. Sorry, I just want to make sure that they get asked and answered. So you mentioned feeling the presence of all these ancient relations, which is just really beautiful. And, on Embercombe's land, there's a stone circle, there's a sacred well. And with my experience of the journey, it was just this really new experience to have this ancestral connection, which was a completely novel way to embody and experience something like that. And then this overwhelming nature connection, which was just, again, completely novel in terms of personal development work. And there's a series of different body works, voice work, and our wonderful Dave Hampton, a Journey back rower, has asked, do you do voice work and such on the descent as well, and singing? And if so, could you say why? Why is that? Because I know that's a big integral part of the journey. Does that sort of extend these rituals and ceremonies and voice work into the descent, or is it purely nature connection?
Well, that's interesting, see, because, so thanks, Dave, but what is nature connection, see? So does nature connection not include singing, or does it not include dance? If I can put it in a broadest content, and this is not part of the descent, does it not include lovemaking? Does it not include, washing ourselves? Does it not include, everything that fills a life? So yes, the descent does include singing. Now the journey does, and it's pretty much one occasion that happens on one evening. But on the descent, it happens 3 times. There's three sessions. And that singing happens outdoors in a specific way, seeking to find the voice, that archaic voice deep within us that wishes to speak out, if you like, to be heard and to connect. And of course, as we know, we're all different, aren't we? For some people, to sing is that's their natural preferred way. For some to dance, a natural preferred way. For some to sit in silence, immobile, a natural way. For some to make things, their natural way. For some to sit in council, in deep dialogue, their natural way. Or if you like, the gateway through which they first like to pass before they experiment with others. So that voice work, that singing that happens on the descent, I would say is very much part of doing that. And it's also about lifting our voice, because both the journey and the descent are also about just being heard, like lifting our voice. One of the Native Americans were always going on about how quiet the Brits were, you know, how polite and quiet. And they were saying, we know you find us loud and crass, but for goodness sake, you know, let us hear your voice, like speak up, you know, and shed your embarrassment, you know, fill your lungs and your belly. And when somebody says, well, I can't make a loud noise, I've heard that many, many times. And I have been tempted at times to say, I don't believe you. I'm sorry, I just don't. If I lit a cigarette, let it smolder a bit, and then just quietly poked it, you know, on your leg, do you think you might find a voice? It's nonsense, isn't it? We find a voice, we have a voice. When you hear people sing, there's this Native American, supposedly Native American song, lovely song. The river is flowing, flowing and growing, the river is flowing back to the sea. Native American? Nonsense, you know, absolute nonsense. It's a lovely song. I sang it to my little child several times every day for months. In fact, it was part of his blessing ceremony in the stone circle. Well, what does a Native American Indigenous people's song or chant sound like? Well, my God, it's the hair on the back of your neck goes up. It's fierce. It's you know, it just screams to creation. It's the feet stamp on the ground. The drums are beating. I mean, it's all together. It's wild, you know. So, you know.
On that note, we do have an online singing circle this Friday. So it's hosted by our lovely Helen Ishu, who comes onto the journey and holds our choir. So we've sort of moved things online, but yeah, do please join us for that. And I see Rupert has a question. Would you like to unmute yourself, Rupert? Any luck? There we go.
Thanks, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so of course I want to say yes to falling in love with life and being pierced by the poignancy and the beauty of life. But I can't do that without feeling the pain and knowing what we know in this age about the times we're living in, whether it be social injustice or ecological degradation. And sometimes I struggle to how to hold the magnitude of the challenges we're facing in. And I want to, of course, acknowledge the struggle also is part of our life. But I would like to ask that question of, yeah, how do you face the magnitude of the challenges we're living in a way that opens rather than closes, that liberates rather than constricts?
Thanks, Rupert. It's a great question. I think the answer is there is no one way, of course. People do it differently. But when I first began working with the Indigenous people that mentored me, one of their first comments was, Mac, you are dying of sadness. You are so filled with sorrow. You are hurting so much from all these things. So, you know, and I tell this story, as I'm sure some of you will know at least, you know, they said, you know, we have ceremonies for that help people die. Would you like us? We can get it arranged in the next couple of days, you know, boom, 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 you know, and we'll help you die. Is that your choice? You want to die? We understand. You're filled with grief. You want to die? Or do you want to live? You know, you want to live? Then you're going to have to ride into that question that you've brought, Rupert. How do I live allowing myself to be soft enough to feel the hurt and alive enough to feel the beauty and the joy? Because we do live in this rather binary world. We do imagine, is it one or the other? Or is it possible to hold both? Well, I think that's what's asked of us, really. And so how do we do that? Well, you know, I can only speak for myself, and I do not suggest that in myself is a sort of, polished result of that journey. I just know that that's the journey I'm on. I find many things exquisitely and brutally painful. And I find many things exquisitely and delightfully wonderful. I just feel the answer is all around shedding. For me, it's around ideas of what it means. The young man who thought he knew what it meant to be a young man, learning how to set aside certain ideas of what that meant, putting aside, so that then we begin to think of strength and courage, also in terms of vulnerability, softness, capacity for empathy, compassion, all these things, and yet also not denying, if you like, the other, the full thing. How? I don't know if I can answer that, but I think many of us have a slightly leaning one direction or the other. I would advise, always seeking to achieve some kind of dynamic balance. So, because it really was, they said to me, we cannot work with you in this, if you insist on remaining in that state. We know that's how you genuinely feel, but we need to believe that you are open, or are you addicted to seeing the world in that way, because that way you don't have to change, that way you can stay in your little world, and a sorrowful world, and stay there. And if that's the case, then we're sorry, we can't help. So I think that's really important. I really do. Yeah, but I don't think there are any easy answers. One thing I know, is why I deeply distrust, and I can't relate to various spiritual traditions where it's simply all about the joy, ecstasy, wonder, and one love, and there's no acknowledgement of the millions. And and I always feel I really dislike what feels like this sort of unspoken criticism of those whose lives are misery, because on some level perhaps they deserved it, as it were. I can't relate to it. So the two together somehow.
Thank you. Great question. Vicky, you've had your hand up. I'm asking you to unmute. Hello.
Hi, Mac.
I do.
It's not really a well-formed question. Just what you said really at the very beginning, that it's not just about a personal thing. It's like, because I did the journey in October and benefited hugely. I have a very comfortable, happy, easy life. But it's really helped my connection with my land, with the way that I'm living on this piece of earth, and my feelings towards where I'm living now. But just and if people come to me, I'm there. I'm able to help in some small way, maybe. But I'm not out there and doing anything particularly. I have signed up for the descent, and yeah, I just feel that perhaps I'm lacking in some way.
But first of all, Vicky, I mean, I don't. How can I put this? we have to work these things out, don't we, ourselves? And it is not my place or anybody else's to judge somebody else's where they're at. What's wonderful, you asked the question, okay, so after this call, when we're finished and you are in your home and you have the evening unfolding before you, if you sat with that question of like, you know, and you ask yourself, is it important to me? You know, do I feel invited to give more than I'm already giving? You might ask yourself, what am I giving now? And I would suggest you do not sort of diminish whatever it is you do. You might well have heard me tell that story of the woman at the supermarket checkout. You know, I don't know if you have. Okay, so myself and Kai, my little boy, we're standing there. He's 2 and a bit, you know, and we collected some stuff, and I say to him, which checkout should we go to? You know, who do you like to go to? So he looks along the whole line of all the checkout people, and he selects this woman. He says, you know, he wants to go there. So I'm intrigued, you know, I wonder why, and that's fun. And so we go there, and you know, that means that we have to queue, whereas another one is ready and waiting. But and all the time I'm just feeling into this and watching and listening and observing. Now, what happens in that moment? This woman, who no one would pick out in the crowd for anything exceptional about her, she is sort of entirely faceless, if you know what I mean. You know, would never be picked out. If we were picking sides for the soccer team, she wouldn't have been, you know, she would have been one of the end ones, as it were. What we receive from her is, I reckon, a blessing. She is kind, she is sweet, she is interested, she's curious, she's alive, she's loving, she's all kinds of fabulous things. And we laugh and we smile and we interact. And as we pass through, I just think to myself, wow, yes, if there was ever such a thing as a second coming within, as it were, the Christian tradition, and Jesus decided to incarnate as a checkout person in a supermarket, you know, that would be a pretty cool move, because people queue up, as it were, to go through. Do you know what I mean? And that's what that woman does in that very humble role. So it doesn't need to be a big thing, but we do need to ask that question, I think, about our gifts, what it is we have to offer, what it is we have to share, and then find a context within which that can happen. And there are more efficient and less efficient ways of doing that. But the whole thing has to work, because we're not asked, I don't think, to be martyrs. We're asked to be moved by the love that we have to share. Yes, so it's not a burden. Yep. But sometimes what holds us back is some fear, or some sense that it will disturb the status quo, and it probably will. But ultimately, what's going to happen, to my mind, in the next 10, 30 years will be massively influenced by how many people decide to in some way become active towards the world that we would like. And if in the end we don't get what we'd like, there may be many people sat with their head in their hands thinking, why, when I knew, and whenever all the information was there, did I not, as it were, step out of my comfort zone? Now, these are quite tough and hard things to think about, aren't they? But I'd love you to consider it still that supermarket story. I honestly feel if a person took a job like that and said to themselves, every person that passes before me, I will do my very best to, as it were, bring a little love and beauty to them as they come, I think it will be amazing. Similarly, I had an experience with a taxi driver who drove me crazy, because after a long journey of endless missing trains and all the rest of it, finally leap into his cab and ask him to drive me as fast as he can to the Wilderness Festival where I'm speaking in a few minutes. And who, after a long pause and a very slow indrawn breath, says to me, you know, like chill. He said, chill. He said, you've got hopelessly wrong idea about festivals. You're not meant to go steaming in there saying, I've got to get there in time, I'm going to be late. He said, just relax, fall back, we'll take a slow drive. That's what festivals are all about. So I'm close to exploding at this point, because I'm meant to be on that stage. So in the end, at a certain point in this conversation, I just said, look, Mohammed, I said, you don't understand, I have to be on that. You're sat in this, he said something like, you have such a nice, comfortable life, you do all these wonderful things. You're this speaker who just goes around, doing this thing. I'm just a cab driver. That finished me off. And I just said, look, every day you incarcerate in your cab, somewhere between 10 and 30 odd people for somewhere between 10 minutes and an hour, as it were. You have limitless coaching and mentoring opportunities to inspire people, to tell stories, to seek and understand who they are, to connect with them, to sort of bring something. And to his credit, Mohammed became really inspired with this idea. And he said, shit, he said, yeah, I never thought of it like that. And in the end, he blagged his way through security at Wilderness, got me right up to the stage, helped me get on the stage. He virtually lifted me onto the stage and then shouted to everyone, ladies and gentlemen, the international speaker, Mac Macartney. And then sometimes we just have to look at our circumstances again a little differently and have fun and say, okay, this is an interesting challenge. I'll give it a go.
I'm sorry to be the horrible timekeeper, but we have run over. Thank you so very much. I know there was one more question, but we will have to wrap up. And apologies on my part, the choir is not this Friday, it's the end of the month, so next Friday. So please do join us. And yes, we also have a fire ceremony, an online fire ceremony next week, which is very exciting. So please do have a look on our Facebook page for that. And yes, thank you again, Mac, for your wonderful words and introduction. I hope we all have a taster into the journey and the descent, and we hope that you can come onto our wild land soon. Thank you very much.
Can I say
any last words, Mac?
Say something briefly.
Yes.
I don't know why. I guess I'm saying this because I don't know quite where you're at now, Vicky. Okay. If I was there, I'd give you a hug, except that would be a very wrong thing to do given the current circumstance. To everybody, don't be disheartened, to understand, this is not I don't think of it as a heavy thing. Think of it as this incredible opportunity, this life. And just ask, how do I wish to live this life? Will I insist on allowing my fears to stand in the way, or my poor sense or shaky sense of self-esteem? Move towards those things, step in, and it's all fine. It is, in essence, we are a part of a far bigger story of which we have very limited understanding. So I would just say that, and I've really enjoyed being in your company. Hope we get to see you at Embercombe in one context or another.
Yes, and to summarize, and it's one of our favorite quotes here at Embercombe, from Mary Oliver, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? And I think that's a nice way to finish and end. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we hope to see you all soon. Thanks, Mac.
Bye-bye.
Take
care. Thank you. Bye-bye.